Please. Please don't take her from me. Please. I'm begging you, please. Please don't take her from me.
Hold my hand. Take my hand.
Please don't take her. This moment, it was very emotional for me, and it's a moment I never thought I would actually share with the public, but here goes. This song I just played for us, called Precious Lord Take My Hand by the great, late, honorable, the legend, Miss Mahalia Jackson. It was the very song that was playing when I accepted, or more so was coming to terms with the fact that in that moment I could have lost my twin brother when he was dealing with his near dance of death, as I called it, or as it's better known as, about to take his life, about to commit suicide. And I tell you, I cried like he was already gone. And honestly, in that moment, I was just waiting for that call, letting me know that he had done it so I could start to grieve or commence the grieving process. That's how real it was for me. But how would I actually grieve for a loved one? Thankfully and unfortunately, for the sake of making this episode, I don't know. No. I mean, I have grieved before, briefly for my uncle when he passed, but due to the fact we didn't exactly have too many interactions in my life, it didn't exactly have, so much weight on my heart. I mean, as opposed to my mother and my grandmother, which, yeah, both of them, even to this day, they still carry that with them. But then again, when you lose a sibling, it's harder. When you lose a child, it's just, But while we're actually on the subject, losing an immediate family member now, for me, I honestly feel like I would be in shock for years on end, and then finally, out of nowhere, start breaking down, crying for ages, just letting it all out after holding it in for years, decades maybe. I don't know. And then, it'll all just come out and just how it ended up looking like Phyllis Hyman during any one of her concert performances of Old Friend, which, whew, Miss Phyllis Hyman, shout out to you. Love that woman, I do. I mean, the voice is just, or it was just, so good, it'll make you cry. And hell, it made her cry too. But, what are we talking about? Oh, yes, grief. Grief is a lot more than loss and a shed tear. Like everything, there are other factors. And with coronavirus still taking people away suddenly, and gun violence nowadays sending people to morgues and funerals in drones, everybody is in a different stage or place in their quote-unquote grieving process. So, since it is going around and affecting people's lives everywhere you look, turn, and damn near watch the news, or every time you watch the news, I should say, let's talk about it, shall we? Quote unquote, grief. Now, grief, for the sake of continuity, is defined as a deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement. Now, everybody has experienced grief in some shape, sense, fashion, or form, whether it be for a family member, a loved one, which is the classic sources of grief, or to be for a home, a truth, or a sacred belief / opinion / view that someone cannot believe wasn't how they always thought it to be. Oh yes, that's considered grief too. It's just a more different and complex grief, but to one extent and to how long it lasts, Yeah, child, I don't know. I really don't. I don't know how to answer that. Logically or even emotionally, since, although I've had some grief in my life, like I mentioned before, it hasn't been to the point of, I know it backwards and forwards. I almost feel like I should have gotten somebody for this, but again, it is still my show and it's still my own words. Now, and actually, I almost feel like this episode should be held off for a next session down the line until I've experienced some. But like grief, it's better to take care of it now before it quote unquote seeps out in different ways, which, yeah, Kanye or Mr. West, Mr. West, Mr. West, Mr. West. Yeah, we, yeah, but we gonna talk about you, boo, because, I'm falling in love. Uh-huh, honey. But let's talk about the grieving process, honey. But let's talk about the grieving process, shall we? Otherwise known as the 7 stages of grief, which follows as shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression and loneliness, the upwards turn, reconstruction and working through, and then finally, acceptance and hope. Well, first and foremost, let me... Goodness gracious. Well, first and foremost, let me offer my sincerest condolences to the families and all those other people who were affected by the recent mass shootings in both Buffalo, New York a week ago and Uvalde, Texas on the 24th of May, roughly a week ago. Which, I have no words. I really don't. I couldn't even imagine just... Leave me home. Goodness, the country I live in. Now, these stages of grief, they don't exactly happen in any particular order, despite being listed as such. And the duration of each stage, they can vary all around. And they can vary, depending on, for who and or what is being grieved for. For example, losing a pet or a lover, you can always replace that. And you can always move past that eventually. Now, losing a parent or a child, I don't care what nobody want to say. You never really get over that, especially in the cases of, if you were actually really close to the person or if you didn't exactly get to resolve things with that particular person before they passed on. Child, that's a different kind of pain I couldn't even imagine. And that's one that's just going to sit with you forever. Okay? Forever. But let's move on. Now, the first 2 stages, they're usually the hardest. And the first 2 stages we're talking about is the shock and denial and, of course, the pain and the guilt. Because mostly, you can be in a state of shock and deny your feelings altogether. And then, of course, the pain and the guilt of the loss, that can have you stuck in a whole other world of depression and loneliness. And then, after you start going through all those, then you start to try to bargain about who did it, how did it happen, and why, and then you start to get angry. And then you kind of just stuck in all that, and you keep repeating those basic 5 for a while, and that's just half the grieving process, child. Just half. Now, there are many ways to grieve, and one of them does involve a funeral. And a funeral is an interesting event where you gather in a place, either be a funeral home, a church, or whichever designated area you would like, or a backyard in some cases, to quote-unquote celebrate and or mourn the life of a person and or pet, I've seen it done, who is no longer with us. And speaking of which, we now interrupt this episode for a brief PSA. Okay, people, I'm telling y'all right now, Stop posting selfies in front of the deceased. Okay? I'm so sick and tired of seeing that shit. All right? Have some decorum. Have some respect. Or better yet, what is this? What is the newscaster on on NBC used to say? The fuck are you doing? Thank you, Sue Simmons. We missed you for that. The only woman who could ever get away with saying that shit on camera. Yes. Especially while going to commercial break. Talk about a hype mic. Let me stop. Now, other forms of getting over something or someone that you've lost, otherwise known as, dealing with grief, can, result in behavioral changes, whether it's drinking a lot more often, even during the day, falling into a full-on depression and just feeling and looking like something from The Walking Dead, or just having or you can just have a whole personality change altogether, which Kanye, Mr. West, Yeezy. Oh, no, not the other name. Oh, God, no. You will never hear me say that other name. I rebuke it in the name of Jesus. No. Okay? Kanye, Mr. West. Yee. What's going on? What's going on? I mean, we gotta talk because, ever since your mother passed, it's like you've changed, and we just wonder, where are you? What's going on? Are you still in the sunken place, beloved? Talk to me. But you know what? It is what it is. I'm going to keep you in my praise. Just take it slow and just be easy, all right? Just drive slow, homie. Actually, one could say that Kanye has went through all the stages of grief, at least in my opinion. I'm going to say it. I feel like he's went through all the stages of grief on full display. From the shock at the night it all in his head, to the pain and guilt he carries because of the tragic circumstance, to the anger he'd be giving anybody, whether it be Sway or Taylor Swift during that interesting night at the VMAs, of course sponsored by Hennessy, or maybe the bargaining he does with his soul with every one of his many outbursts, incidences, declarations, and his many musical outputs. And then, of course, there's also the depression and loneliness I'm sure he feels on a daily basis. Goodness gracious, I couldn't even imagine. But the question remains, when does it turn? I don't know, but there does come a time where an upwards turn happens, where you enter the world and rejoin the human race again. Of course, this usually happens when you let every little pain out, every little hurt out, or as my greatest teacher of all, Miss Iyanla Vincent, has put it, let your heart break. Let your heart bleed. Okay, we'll go with the first one. Let your heart break. Whether it's a scream, a shout, a weird noise, or just a moment of sadness in the form of sudden crying out of nowhere. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay for your heart to break. Because if you don't suffer, you don't live. And if you don't go through anything, you're not living life. Okay? But after all that, there is reconstruction and working it through, where you start building back your life without whatever it is that is no longer with you in your life, day by day, step by step, one at a time. This is very important. You don't necessarily have to let it go completely, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an overall theme in your life no more. You start, I wouldn't say tapering it off, but you start easing off of it. You start letting it go gradually. Okay? But eventually, if at all, to be honest, acceptance comes. And then hope follows. Maybe Actually, I think Sister Barbara Streisand, I think you said it best in your beautiful song, you know. For I've gotta go again, I've gotta drive again, I'm gonna feel my heart coming alive again before the parade passes. But it all goes back to one question. Do I hold on? Do I let it go in order to move on and move forward? Do I hold on or let go in order to move on and move forward? Well, it depends, since, you can hold on to the memory and let go of the grief, or let go of the memory and hold on to the grief, or hold on or let go of both. So many choices. I don't know. But in terms of grief, that's about all I got, and that's it. But here are some takeaways. Grief has no time limit, okay? You can do whatever you want for however long you want, okay? No one really lets go completely. There's always that little piece. But, the same breath, make grief be only a little piece. Don't live in it, all right? They can't move on unless you do. And yes, there may be clouds and wind and torrential rain. Baby, let me tell you. But if you keep walking forwards, you're gonna find shelter. Or if you stay in the storm, eventually it'll pass. Nothing lasts forever. Don't let grief be the exception. Come on, baby. Don't stand in that grief. Come on in from that rain. From the rain. From the rain. Come on in from that rain, baby. Just come on in.